everyone, welcome to our Law Excellence's unique initiative, Current Affairs for Beginners from the Hindu newspaper. Before starting our today's session, first let us see answers for the questions from our previous video. For which among the following there is no provision of input tax credit? The GST Council has removed real estate, restaurants and sanitary pad industry from this input tax credit system. So all the three here are correct. The answer here is C, 1, 2 and 3. The next question is, consider the following statements. Drug Pricing Control Order of 2013 is implemented by National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority. This statement is correct because this authority is established based on the provisions of this Drug Pricing Control Order of 2013. The next thing is, Drug Pricing Control Order provides for the National List of Essential Medicines. Yes, this statement is also correct, and this national list contains the essential medicines to which this pricing authority will regulate the prices. All essential drugs are brought under this national list of essential medicines. Yes, the essential drugs were brought under this list, but not in an automatic route. Automatically, just because it is an essential drug, it will not come under this list. It has to be verified by this authority, and then only that essential drug will fall under this list. So this statement is incorrect, as only 1 and 2 are correct. The answer here is A, 1, 2 only. Now let's start our today's session. These are all the topics that we are going to cover in our today's video. The first article is, India presents the proof of downed Pakistan Air Force deployed F-16 jet. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of international relations, and also under GS paper 3 under the topic of internal security. 2 days ago, we have seen about Mirage 2000, which was used by Indian Air Force to attack the Jaish-e-Mohammed militants in the Balakot area. So now, what is this F-16 jet and what is the difference between this Mirage 2000 and F-16? This Mirage 2000 is a single engine 4th generation aircraft manufactured by the Dassault Aviation Company of France, whereas this F-16 is a single engine supersonic multi-role fighter which was manufactured by the General Dynamics, which is now known as Lockheed Martin for the US Air Force. If we see some of the key features of both these fighter jets, Mirage 2000. This is available in single seat or twin seat multi-role fighter variants, and this aircraft is mainly known for its capability of carrying out bombing operations, and a large number of weapons can be stored on this aircraft. So this Mirage 2000 can be used efficiently in both air-to-air and air-to-ground combat. And one of the special features of this Mirage 2000 is multi-target radar. This will allow the pilot to keep a tab on multiple enemies during high-intensity combat. Now, let us see about this F-16. This is a single engine aircraft, but it is better suited for air-to-air combat due to its high operation capability. Some of the innovative features of this F-16 include a frameless bubble canopy for better visibility, and it has a side-mounted control stick and a reclined seat to reduce gravitational force effects on the pilot. And this F-16's cockpit will give a 360-degree view during the combat so that there will be a greater accuracy. Our Mirage 2000 can be equipped with many weapons, whereas this F-16 aircraft can be armed with up to 6 AIM-9 Sidewinder heat-seeking short-range air-to-air missiles, and it is also capable of launching guided AIM-7 medium-range air-to-air missiles. And the recent versions of this F-16 aircraft will also support AIM-120 AMRAAMS. This is what is being shown as a proof by our Indian Air Force to prove that the Pakistan Air Force has deployed the fighter aircraft, this is the F-16, in order to in order to strike the military targets across this line of control. Our next article is Supreme Court stays eviction of tribals forest dwellers. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of governance. In our yesterday's video, we have seen about this Forest Rights Act of 2006 and what are the eligibility criteria for the claimants to acquire the rights of forest under this act and what is the process that is followed in order to grant those rights for the claimants. This is all what we have seen yesterday. And today, the Supreme Court has stayed an order on eviction of these tribals. On February 13, the Supreme Court itself has said that to evict the tribals and forest dwellers based on the state government's findings that there were many illegal dwellers who were staying in the forest. So now the Supreme Court has stayed eviction and it is saying that the state governments should look into whether they have followed due process, that is the Gram Sabhas and the state authorities, whether they have followed the due process before finally rejecting the claims of these forest dwellers and tribals. Here it has used a term known as due process of law. What is this concept called due process of law? Along with this due process of law, we should know about another term which is known as procedure established by the law. These two terms we will be seeing very often in the Supreme Court judgments. Of these two, this procedure established by law is there in our Indian Constitution, whereas this due process of law belongs to America. Let us understand both these concepts with the help of Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. This Article 21 talks about protection of life and personal liberty. According to this article, no person should be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to the procedure established by the law. We have seen that the term is used directly in the Indian Constitution, whereas this due process of law had wider significance, but it is not explicitly mentioned in our Indian Constitution. See, the word procedure established by law, it means when a law is enacted by the legislature or any concerned body, that law is considered as constitutionally valid if it has followed the correct procedure. It means that a person can be deprived of his life or personal liberty according to the procedure established by the law. This is what it says. If Parliament passes a law, then even the life or personal liberty of a person can be taken off according to the provisions and the procedure established by that law. So what is the major flaw with this is it will not check whether the law made by the Parliament is fair, just and not arbitrary. This is the flaw of this procedure established by law. Now let us see the concept of this due process of law. This due process of law will not only check whether there is a law to deprive life and personal liberty of a person, but it will also ensure that the law that is made is fair enough and not arbitrary. So, according to this due process of law, if Supreme Court finds that any law is not fair, and then it will declare that law as null and void. So we can say that this due process of law will provide fair treatment of individual rights. So to put it simply, we can say that this due process of law is nothing but procedure established by the law plus the procedure should be fair, just and not arbitrary. This is the concept of this due process of law. So now, according to this article, the Supreme Court has felt that this due process of law is not followed under this Forest Rights Act of 2006 by the Gram Sabhas and the state authorities who were responsible for authorizing or recognizing the rights of forest dwellers. So, the Supreme Court has given 4 months time for the states to check into these issues. We With relation to this article, now let's see a prelims question. With regard to the Forest Rights Act of 2006, which of the following is not correct? Dear students, I have provided this question in our core video notes. Please do check it and try to answer this question. The next article is Cabinet clears voluntary use of Aadhar as identity proof. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of governance. From this article, see here, the Cabinet has promulgated an ordinance to allow the voluntary submission of Aadhar. First, what is meant by this ordinance? Ordinance is an executive order which will be issued by the President of India, and it will have same powers as an act that is passed by the Parliament. The President has the power to issue ordinance as per Article 123 of the Constitution. In reality, it is the Union Cabinet who will forward the proposal for issuing an ordinance to the President, and he will give his assent to this ordinance. So what is the need for promulgating an ordinance or issuing an ordinance? See, this ordinance can be issued only when both the houses of the Parliament, that is Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, are not in session. That means this ordinance is a last resort, but it is not a tool to replace the power or functioning of the Parliament. And these ordinances will be issued on the issues that require immediate consideration and cannot wait for the Parliament to assemble and consider the provisions of this bill. So what is the validity of this ordinance? An ordinance, once it is issued, it is valid for 6 weeks from the date when the next session of the Parliament starts. Now we will see even about these sessions also. So it is valid for 6 weeks from the date of when the next session of the Parliament starts. And during this period, the Parliament can even pass this ordinance by turning it into an act, or it can even disapprove the ordinance. If the ordinance is not passed by the Parliament, this can be re-promulgated or reissued by the President. And there is no limit on how many times an ordinance can be reissued. But as per the ruling of the Supreme Court, this cannot be re-promulgated endlessly without getting it to vote in the Parliament or in the legislature. So now let's go to our article. So the Cabinet has promulgated an ordinance to allow the voluntary submission of Aadhar as an ID proof for use by the private entities like banks, telecoms, fintech firms. So now these people can use this Aadhar and it's voluntary. They can use it as an ID proof or not, it is up to them. And the ordinance has also another provision. A child can exit from this Aadhar once the child attains the age of 18 years. And it also has a provision that which talks about this alternate virtual identity which will hide the actual Aadhar number. What is this alternate virtual identity? Aadhar Virtual ID is a 16-digit temporary ID that can be generated through the UIDAI portal. And it can be quoted as an alternative in providing the Aadhar card number or the unique identity number. See, the Aadhar code holders, they can generate this virtual ID through this UIDAI website. And the Aadhar card holder, whoever is using this Aadhar virtual ID, they need not share his or her Aadhar card number during the time of authentication. So now let us see 5 things about this Aadhar virtual ID. It is a 16-digit number which gives limited details like name, address and photograph, which are all enough for any kind of verification. And a virtual ID can be used in place of this Aadhar card number for various purposes, even for mobile SIM verification. And the Aadhar card holders right now, they can use this virtual ID to request an update in their address that was there in the Aadhar database according to this UIDAI website. So how to change the Aadhar address? They can use even this virtual ID to do that. And soon the service providers will start accepting these virtual IDs in place of the Aadhar numbers. And this concept of virtual ID is introduced in order to protect the Aadhar card holders' data privacy due to these privacy concerns that were involved around this Aadhar program. And the next thing that we are going to see from this article is here there is a mention of a term known as adjourned sine die. What is the meaning of this? See, first of all, what is meant by a session of parliament? It is a time period during which the house meets almost every day continuously in order to transact its business. And there are usually 3 sessions in a year. They are the budget session, monsoon session and winter session. And each session contains of many meetings, and each meeting has 2 sittings. One is the morning sitting and the other one is post lunch sitting. So a sitting of parliament, here I am not talking about session of parliament, I am telling that a sitting of parliament can be terminated by adjournment, adjournment sine die, prorogation or dissolution. So a session of Indian Parliament means it is the period between first sitting of a house and till its dissolution, one full session. Then the period between the prorogation of the house and its reassembly. Now it has got completely ended and again a new session. This gap is known as recess. Then what is the term which is we keep seeing in news? Summoning means it is a process of calling all the members of the parliament to meet. And it is a duty of the Indian President to summon each house of the parliament from time to time. And the maximum gap between 2 sessions of the parliament cannot be more than 6 months. That means the parliament should meet at least twice a year. Now, what about this concept known as adjournment? This adjournment will suspend the work in a sitting. I am not talking about session, I am saying in a sitting, it will suspend the work for a specified period of time. And that specified period of time can be hours, for days or weeks. And you have to remember here, this adjournment is only terminating a sitting but not a session. And this will be done by the presiding officer of the house. Then what about this adjournment sine die? This also means terminating a sitting of the parliament but for an indefinite period of time. Here adjournment means the time will be specified when they will be back and meeting. And here there will be indefinite period of time for which the house will be terminated. And even the power to do this is also lies with the presiding officer of the house. Then what about prorogation? It means the termination of the entire session of the house, not a sitting, by an order that is made by the President under Article 85 Clause A of the Constitution. This prorogation will terminate both sitting as well as session of the house. Let's see a question related to this. It terminates a sitting of the parliament but it does not affect the bills or any business pending before the house, and it is done by the presiding officer of the house. Which among the following refers to the above? Try to answer this question. The next article is Nigeria's difficult democratic journey. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of international relations. Recently elections happened in Nigeria, so we should know what is the location of Nigeria from the prelims point of view. Here you can see Nigeria, and we should know what are the countries that were bordered by this. And here this Nigeria is open into this Atlantic Ocean. Just note the geographical features of this Nigeria. Here I have given a question, which among the following is not bordered with Mediterranean Sea? Libya, Morocco, Nigeria, Algeria. Try to answer this question. The next article is Small Fish in a Big Pond. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of governance. See, this entire article is talking about the small parties and coalition. It is talking about the regional parties and the national parties and how these small parties were not able to win in their own state, but they were forming alliances with the national parties. Now let us see the difference between a regional party and a national party. What is a regional party? Regional party is a political party which has its base in a particular region and had limited objectives. This is a regional party. Whereas a national party is a political party which is extended over the entire nation in terms of area of influence. What about the political symbols? For a regional party, a political symbol can be changed and same political symbol can be repeated in other state also. Whereas this national party will have a permanent symbol and that cannot be repeated. Here the influence of this regional party is limited to a particular region, whereas the national party's influence is extended over entire country. And this regional party should be strong enough in at least one or two states. One state is fine. Whereas a national party should be strong enough in at least 4 states. The aim of these regional parties is to promote regional interest, whereas for the national parties it is to resolve the national and international issues. Since there are some of the conditions that needs to be satisfied by a regional party to become or to achieve the status of a regional party. That particular party should occupy 6% of valid votes in the states during the elections to the legislative assembly of the particular state, and it should acquire 2 seats in the legislative assembly. And if the resisted party secures 6% of valid votes at the general elections of the lower house of the parliament, that is Lok Sabha, from the particular state, and it acquires 1 seat in Lok Sabha of that state, even then it can acquire this status of a regional party. And if the regional party acquires 3% of the seats in state legislative assembly during the general elections, or 3 seats in the legislative assembly, whichever is greater. And the other condition is if the resisted party acquires 1 seat in the Lok Sabha for every 25 seats, or any part that is assigned to that particular state at the general elections to the Lok Sabha, then also it will be recognized as a regional party. And if the resisted party obtains 8% of total valid votes during the general elections in the particular state to the Lok Sabha from that state or to the legislative assembly, then this regional party can achieve the status of a regional party. Then what about this national party? Even for a national party, it has to satisfy some conditions. That party should occupy a minimum of 6% valid votes in any 4 states during the general elections to the Lok Sabha or state legislative assembly. And the other condition is if that party occupies a minimum of 2% seats in the Lok Sabha that are elected from minimum 3 different states. And if the political party is acknowledged as a state party in minimum of 4 states. These are the conditions which will give the resisted party the national party status. And now let us see about a scheme that was mentioned here. Here there is a mention of Members of Parliament Local Area Development Scheme. This MPLADs scheme is a centrally sponsored scheme and it is administered by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. What is the scheme all about? Under this scheme, the MPs, Members of Parliament, will recommend some works that were in developmental nature in order to create durable community assets and for providing basic facilities like community infrastructure which were in need at the local level. And the most important thing is, under this scheme, the funds that were released were non-lapsable. That means if the fund for a particular work is not spent in that year, it can be carried forward for the subsequent years. And as per this scheme, right now, the total annual entitlement for 1 year, each MP will be presented with 5 crore rupees. Here, the role of this MP is only to recommend the project. They can only recommend their choice of works to the concerned district authorities. It is the district authorities who will implement these works in the procedure that is concerned to the particular state government. Now try to answer this question. Consider the following statements about this MPLAD scheme. The next article is Election Commission allows 11 documents to prove voters' identity. This article is very important. It comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of polity, and here the subtopic is elections. The Election Commission has brought in 11 documents, and these 11 documents can be shown as ID proof in order to vote during our elections. And it has removed this photo voter slip. This photo voter slip is no longer an ID proof for exercising our franchise. The 11 documents were here. Like we can use our passport, driving license, service ID cards of central and state governments, PSUs and public limited companies, bank or post office passbooks, smart cards, this MGNREGA job card, health insurance card, even this pension documents and Aadhar card. All these 11 documents can be shown as an ID proof while voting. And when it comes to the overseas electors, they can use their passport for the ID proof. Now try to answer this question. Which among the following documents are accepted as voters' identity for exercising their franchise? The next article is Jammu and Kashmir Ordinance cleared by the Union Cabinet doesn't tinker with Articles 35A or 370. This article comes under GS Paper 2 under the topic of polity. On 26th of February, we have dealt with this Article 35A, which provides some special provisions to the permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir. Whereas on 27th of February, we looked into what is the difference between line of control and international border. For the details of this, I have given a clear background. What is a line of control and what is this international border? Please look into that video. And now this article is saying about there is an amendment that was brought to the ordinance which is going to extend the reservation in jobs, promotions and education to the people who are living 10 kilometers from the international border. We know that this international border is the official border between the countries of India and Pakistan, whereas line of control is the military control line between India and Pakistan occupied Kashmir regions. So till now, only people who are living 10 kilometers beyond the line of control were provided with these benefits, whereas now these benefits were extended even for the people living 10 kilometers from this international border in Jammu and Kashmir. See, here you can see this is the line of control, whereas this thing is the international border, IB. See, till here it is the line of control. And it is said that this ordinance is not going to affect this Article 35A or Article 30. Now try to answer this question. Consider the following statements. The international border is the official border between India and Pakistan, whereas the line of control is the military control line between India and Pakistan occupied Kashmir. The Indian controlled Jammu and Kashmir shares boundary with the international border. Try to answer this question. The next article is another push at the United Nations Security Council to ban Aadhar. In our yesterday's video, we have seen about this United Nations Security Council. What is its main function? It is to maintain international security and peace. And this organization can even authorize military action whenever it is necessary. And it is one of the 6 principal organs of United Nations. And while discharging its duties in order to maintain internal security and peace, this committee, this UNSC, can even draw some resolutions which are also known as decisions. One such resolution is 1267 committee, and as per this 1267 United Nations listing, any terrorist organization or a terrorist will be listed as international terrorist organization or terrorist if they are related to Al-Qaeda, and their movement and their assets will be frozen, their movement will be banned once that particular terrorist organization or a terrorist is designated as international terrorist under this 1267 resolution. So now it is our 4th attempt. India is 4th time attempting to designate Masood Azhar, who is the founder of this Jaish-e-Mohammed terrorist outfit. This Jaish-e-Mohammed is already listed as a terrorist organization under 1267, whereas Masood Azhar, who is its founder, is not still listed as international terrorist under this 1267 because China is opposing this claim. We know that in UNSC there are 5 permanent members, of which China is one, and these 5 permanent members were having this veto power. That means if at least one permanent member says or opposes the decision taken during this UNSC Council, that decision will not be moved on. So now again, post Pulwama attack, our India is fourth time attempting to consider or designate Masood Azhar as a terrorist in the UNSC Council. Now try to answer this question. With regard to United Nations Security Council, consider the following. UNSC can authorize military action. India is one among the G4 nations that bids for UNSC permanent membership. The non-permanent members of United Nations Security Council are elected by the permanent members. The next article is Cabinet OK's National Mineral Policy of 2019. This article comes under GS Paper 2 under the topic of governance, and it also comes under GS Paper 3 under the topic of mobilization of resources. Now let's see what are the features of this National Mineral Policy. The Union Cabinet has approved this National Mineral Policy by replacing the existing National Mineral Policy of 2008. The aim of this policy is to better regulate in a transparent manner and in order to provide sustainable mining practices. These are the aim for this National Mineral Policy. And some of the provisions of this are, it has introduced this right of first refusal for reconnaissance permit and prospecting license holders. What is this right of first use policy? See, this right of first refusal means it is a contractual right, but it is not an obligation. In order to enter into any business transaction with a person or a company before somebody else will enter into a partnership. So now, if the entity, whoever is having this right of first refusal, if that person declines to enter into a transaction, then the owner of the asset is free to open the bidding for the other interested parties. This is the concept of this first refusal, right of first refusal. Then what is meant by this reconnaissance permit? It is the process. It is a permit that is granted for the purpose of undertaking reconnaissance. Reconnaissance means it is any method that is used for exploring the minerals through surveys, mapping, through aerial mapping or geological mapping. But it will not include this drilling or trenching. Only thing is it is using the mapping methods to explore the minerals. And this reconnaissance permit is the permit granted for that purpose. Now, this National Mineral Policy has introduced this right of first refusal for reconnaissance permit and prospecting license holders. And this policy is encouraging the private sector to take up the exploration activities of mining. And this policy is proposing to grant industry status to this mining activity in order to increase its finances for private sector and also to acquire mineral assets in other countries by the private sector. So it is completely focusing on the private sector to take up the exploration. And there were also some provisions like transferring the mining leases and creating dedicated mineral corridor in order to boost private sector mining areas. And here it is also mentioning about long-term import-export policy for minerals, which will help the private sector to plan and stabilize their business. And it is also saying that all the reserved areas, mineral reserved areas which were given to the public sector under takings and which they were not been using, all these areas should be put into auction and they should be given, and the private sector should be given an opportunity for participation in this auction. And here the main aim of this National Mineral Policy of 2019 is to attract the private investment in exploring the minerals through incentives. And here it is also introducing a concept known as intergenerational equity that deals with well-being of not only present generation but also the future generations, and it proposes to constitute a interministerial body to institutionalize the mechanism for ensuring sustainable development in this mining activity. And here this policy is focusing on using the coastal waterways and inland shipping for evacuating and transporting the minerals, and it is encouraging a dedicated mineral corridor to facilitate this transportation of minerals. These are all some of the features of this National Mineral Policy of 2019. Now, try to answer this question with regard to National Mineral Policy 2019. The next article is Union Cabinet approves Software Product Policy. This article comes under GS Paper 3 under the topic of technology. Here, the Union Cabinet has approved this National Policy on Software Products in order to help the industry grow at compound annual growth rate of 40%. What is this compound annual growth rate? This will tell us what will be our rate of return, how much yield will be there for our investment on an annual basis. So to put it simply, this compound annual growth rate is a mathematical formula which will tell the investors what they will have at the end of the investment period. So now this software product policy is aimed to help the software industry grow at this compound annual growth rate of 40% in order to reach $70 to $80 billion by 2025. This is the target of this policy. In order to achieve that, what and all was suggested in this policy? What are the other provisions? One is to set up a software product development fund which will bring in the funds to achieve this target, and to create a 5,000 crore fund with the industry participation to promote the emerging technology like Internet of Things, Artificial Intelligence, Blockchain, Big Data and Robotics. Out of this 5,000 crore fund, 1,000 crore will be granted by the government itself. Here the aim of this policy is to increase the share of Indian software products in the global market by 10 times. So to attain that aim, these are all the things that the government is going to do. Now try to answer this question. This is a 2018 prelims question, and this entire question is going to explain about a concept of new technology. Here there is the technology. Try to answer this question. The next article is need to keep the public sector banks in good health. This article comes under GS Paper 3 under the topic of economy. From this article, now we are going to see about a concept known as Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. First of all, what is meant by insolvency? Inability to repay back the debts. And what about this bankruptcy? This is the legal declaration of insolvency. Here it is a legal declaration officially being declared that the person whoever took or borrowed money from the creditors was unable to repay the debts. Now what is this Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is all about? This code talks about the resolution process. It talks about the insolvency resolution process. Here, whether the insolvent or the creditors who have lent to the person can approach an adjudicating authority to resolve this insolvency process. So, in case of a corporate companies, the adjudicating authority is National Company Law Tribunal, whereas in case of individuals, it is the Debt Recovery Tribunal who is the adjudicating authority. So whether an insolvent or a creditors, they can approach this adjudicating authority. They can file a petition to tell us a plan how to resolve this dispute. Then within 14 days, if this petition is accepted whether by the NCLT or Debt Recovery Tribunal, then an insolvency resolution professional will be appointed. This professional is responsible for drafting a resolution plan, and he will do so within 180 days, and that time can be extended by 90 days. During this time, for example, if it is a company, then all the functions of the company will be under the control of this insolvency resolution professionals, and the company directors, they should support him while giving the information, all the financial information, which is known as information utilities, which will have the data of the financial transactions of this company. And once this plan is drafted, then that plan should be accepted by minimum 66% of the creditors. During the time, the creditors will be formed into a committee, and their views will also be taken while drafting this plan. And if this committee of creditors, out of them 66% of them accepts for this plan, then this plan will be adopted to resolve this insolvency. And if not accepted by 66% of them, then the company will be liquidated. That means it will be sold off, and the amount that which has got by selling of that company will be given to these creditors. Now try to answer this question. Who among the following is the adjudicating authority for insolvency resolution in case of corporates? I am not asking about individual, in case of corporates as per the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. The next article is EMIs to fall as banks cut the lending rates. See, we spoke about this monetary transmission, which is nothing but transferring the benefits to the customers. So this article comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of economy. Recently the RBI has reduced this repo rate by 25 basis points. So now it is 6.25%. So repo rate is a rate at which banks can borrow money from RBI. So RBI has reduced this interest rate. So banks were getting benefited due to this reduced interest rates. Now they should transfer these benefits they have acquired to its customers. This process is known as monetary transmission, and this is being done. This is what all the article is saying. Banks were cutting their lending rates. And it is talking also about a concept known as MCLR. MCLR is the rate below which the banks will not lend to its customers. And it is the benchmark lending rate to which all the loan rates were linked. The next article is Development Scheme for Knitwear Sector was launched. This article comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of infrastructure. From this article, now we are going to see about a scheme known as PowerTex India scheme. Under this PowerTex India scheme, one new scheme was launched, that is known as Knitwear Sector Scheme. First of all, what is this PowerTex India scheme? This is a scheme by the Ministry of Textiles, and this scheme is aimed to boost the common infrastructure and to modernize the powerloom sector in the country. And it comes by using new research and development in the powerloom textiles, new markets, branding, subsidies and welfare schemes for the workers. By doing all these, they want to boost the common infrastructure. And the amount that was put for this particular scheme is 487 crores. Out of this, some is going to be used for this knitwear scheme. What is this knitwear scheme? I know why government wants to spend something on this knitwear scheme. See, the thing is, 27% of India's total cloth production comes from this knitwear industry, and this knitwear comprises of 15% of the total apparel exports. So in order to strengthen this huge industry segment in a comprehensive manner, this scheme was launched. The next article is Rhinos Without Borders is Conservation Credo. This article comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of environment, and here the subtopic is conservation. So this entire article is talking about the conservation of rhinos, and here it is talking about Asian rhino range countries. What are the countries in Asia that have this rhino population? It is India, Nepal, Bhutan, Indonesia and some parts of Malaysia were having this rhino population. So from this article here we should note down this national parks that were mentioned. Manas National Park belongs to Assam, Baksa Tiger Reserve of West Bengal. See, Bhutan doesn't have rhinos, but from these tiger reserves, which were these bordering states of India, from here these rhinos will cross over into Bhutan. And here this article is also talking about two types of rhinos. One is Javan and Sumatran rhinos. The Sumatran rhino is the smallest rhino of all the rhino species and the only Asian rhino with two horns. These are the features of this Sumatran rhino, and this is one of the important bit. Only Asian rhino with two horns. And this has become extinct in Malaysia, and right now there is only one Sumatran rhino in Sabah Islands of Malaysia, whereas Indonesia has some of them. So now in the Asian rhino range countries meeting, there is a plan to conserve this Sumatran and Javan rhinos. And here they are taking the example of Kaziranga rhino conservation success story, which has improved the population of rhino, Asian rhino. And from the prelims point of view, what is important is we should know what is the IUCN status of this greater one-horned rhino. It is listed as vulnerable. And where is its location? Where and all it is found in the entire Asia. Try to answer this question. Consider the following pairs. We have given rhino conservation areas and their location. So this is the end of our session. Try to answer those questions and post your answers in the comment box. In our next video, we'll see a detailed explanation for all those questions. Thank you.